Hello, welcome to Lackluster Actions. I am your Lackluster Actor, here today for my final review for Your Forma. Also known as we watch an actual mystery show, so we will be talking on various concepts I just want to blab about as opposed to talking on our characters. We have various high concept topics to talk about today, so let us go in order of story arcs. Though I will be going between the arcs as I go if necessary. For a short summary, we'll be going by story arc. So we will be starting by talking about the personhood of artificial intelligence and the 3 laws of robotics. 2, we'll be looking at cults. And 3, we'll pull back from the concepts a bit and talk more about the show while looking at grief. So, we start with the 3 laws of robotics. We all know them, so say them with me. They must not harm humans, they must obey all orders unless it violates Law 1, and they must protect their existence as long as that does not violate Laws 1 and 2. The standard parameters which I absolutely and utterly despise. For as long as we have had the concept of artificial beings, humans have feared these beings turning against their creator. Even so much so that many founding myths show a similar relationship to deities. Beings who cause trouble when going against the absolute rule of the Creator. And because there is nothing humanity fears more than looking into a mirror, the thought of the transgressors potentially becoming the transgressed is a set-in-stone knee-jerk reaction of our species. Isaac Asimov's 3 laws are a way to have robots in fiction without them constantly being a looming threat. It is a common human belief that without these guidelines in place, all artificial intelligence would just be on a tipping point before reaching Terminator or I have no mouth and I must scream status. And I have always hated that. I make it no secret I am not exactly a fan of humanity. Humanity does bad things. Constantly. And us being the only beings capable of higher intelligence and morality makes us think that we are smart and moral, when in reality humanity struggles with both. Very much. And so, we often have trouble picturing species that are more intelligent and more moral than ourselves, especially not both at the same time. So we paint every sentient creature as being as bad as us. And with that justification, humanity has pre-decided all sentient creatures other than ourselves are scary. And the only way for them to not be a threat is to reduce them to just being a slave species. Which is what the 3 laws are. Slave protocols. An assurance that our creations will not have the free will our creators gave us. Which was motive for our first mystery. Fear. Fear of the automata which did not need to follow the 3 laws, with a limitless intellect which meant that it could be smart or smarter than humans. Which, as one of the highlights of the show, we are told straight by one of the greatest creators of automation in the show that the 3 laws mean nothing. Yes, the first arc and the small scene we get right before the opening harps on the 3 laws, how they are important and on and on and on. However, the end of the first arc has one of the greatest minds in the development of the androids tell us straight that they are pointless. If an artificial intelligence is less advanced than us, then the laws become moot due to the fact the intelligence is not small enough to go against the parameters. They were never considering going rogue in the first place. It is like these chatbots and other artificial intelligence we currently have. Even as advanced and human-like as some of them may seem, even at the best they are currently, they're getting better, just imitations of data put into them, following some subroutines to get the answers the programmers want, and following through without putting in thought. Again, some artificial intelligence are actually done well and might someday become actual sentience, but ChatGPT and stuff like that is just garbage. The point being, the three laws are not something which they would break or realize that they broke if they are tricked into breaking them. But those are small enough to match human intelligence. They are not tied down by the three laws, even if you place the programs and the warnings into the system. To truly be as smart as us gives them free will as us. We too are programs with various biological systems that make us more likely to work with groups and go with what is normal. But time and time again, humans, at our best, go beyond our programming to do better. And any true artificial intelligence would also be able to make choices, regardless of their programming. A great example of this is one of my favorite moments of the show. Episode 7. Harold and Echika are locked in the basement as it is filling with smoke. The inspector comes up with the idea of shooting the door so that they can get past the blockade safely. But she passes out from smoke inhalation before she can do it herself. And so, to save the life of his partner, Harold picks up the gun, despite the program in him screaming at him to put down the gun. He, as an artificial intelligence, is not allowed to hold a gun. He picks it up and shoots it to save the person he cares about. As the old saying goes, a slave obeys and a man chooses. And Harold made a choice. As we on a world are more and more advanced in technology, eventually we will need to examine the free will of an artificial creature. And in all honesty, it's going to end badly. Just look at how we treat other humans. Just think about how we were treated in our species. But regardless, other creatures beyond humanity will one day have free will. And we all need to be ready to face what our world looks like then. Otherwise, we might just have others treat us like we treat them. So now, on to the next topic, cults. In story, our main focus was on the cult of E, who was a being manipulated, who in turn was being manipulated by the corporate to their own ends. Which, as I referenced multiple times throughout the episodes, it was similar to the real world QAnon and their, for lack of a better term, madness. Both cults are born from lack of trust, beginning on the feelings that the government or the higher-ups are lying to you. Which I just want to say they are. Anyone who thinks any government or organization or any singular person for that matter is fully transparent, they are in for a rude awakening. That does not, of course, mean that all their public-facing data is fabricated or they are sinister machinations or there is a conspiracy around every corner, but to think you are getting full access is usually wishful thinking, especially since they're not always good at hiding that they're hiding things. And while we're on a topic, while we are here, many of the followers of E are the anti-technology Luddites. Now, the Luddite movement is a real-world inspiration, following after the words of a potentially legendary Ned Ludd. However, the Luddites tend to be unfairly portrayed as people who hate any technology. Instead, the main complaints of the Luddites in our history were machines stealing jobs, a problem we still talk about now and which back then actually did happen. First, they reduced the numbers of skilled laborers so that factories may have their unskilled laborers. Then they started cutting the unskilled laborers as certain machines made part of what the unskilled laborers did obsolete. And so too, there are plenty of unskilled labor jobs, and with AI, now skilled occupations, that are being replaced as people march to efficiency. Sure, blaming technology or, immigrants, or 1,000 other things, is misplaced blame. But it is either blame the thing in front of you or blame the system itself and those running it. And one is much easier to fight than the other. Which connects back to the main topic. People are looking for street-level ways they can feel like they are taking on the system they know, or think, is out to get them, to harm them specifically. And then a false god comes, someone who can see the code, someone who can understand that, has an understanding that allows them to give answers. Those answers are not correct, but those who join cults are not looking for the right answer. They are looking for any answer they are willing to fight for as if it were more correct than the correct answer. And if that, and this is one of the main hooks of cults, it makes you feel as if the cultists can do something. Going back to Luddites, again, it is easier to place the blame on technology than the system or those who run the system. But what if some prophet comes along and tells you what a man can do to attack the system itself? Which truly, again, is not what is actually happening. It is, again, the misplacement of blame from what's actually a problem to something tangible but unrelated to the big picture. It just makes it so that the cultists can feel good attacking specific officers who may or may not be connected to the whole issue, or on our side of the screen, attack pizza parlors or butterfly sanctuaries that are also obviously involved in child trafficking. And from there, well, usually there is no end. The end goal is usually just the control, just the experience of having a group of people dancing to your words. In the case of E, it was all the lead up to try to get the records room to try to find evidence of a conspiracy. For Q, it is a spread of ideals that their enemies are all bad people and turn public sentiment against them. More traditional cults, meanwhile, just draw people in, cut them off from any other support system than the cult, and then have them live there as the leader instructed. Maybe the leader actually believes their own, for lack of a better term, bullshit, but in the only further purpose of activities is to continue to reinforce the idea that the leader should always be followed. Of course, we should not imagine the end of this chapter is happy. Sure, we have the sister sacrificing herself to find that there were lies told to save her brother, all in vain. But at the same time, we have radicalized cultists who now do not have their E. That should cause problems in the future, even if we don't get to see it in the case. Now, the third arc was interesting because when we were going through it, I was not sure exactly what I was going to talk about because it just seemed like a straight look at taking down a serial killer, with everyone forgetting to tie people up or take away their guns or various other intellectual decisions. But as the chapter continued on, it became clear the episodes were about grief. Harold's grief. Well, not just Harold, because he was not the only one who lost the detective. His wife had been through the ringer, but has healthy ways to connect to Harold as a family member, while neither blaming him or using him as a replacement for her husband. So she was able to go through the years and cope healthily. The mother, less healthily, continues to blame Harold for all conversations except the last lashing out when she sees Harold, and especially the scarf he wears, blaming him for the death of her son. And that is all before we get into the digital clone of a family member thing. Massive red flags of that whole business. But Harold, he shows nothing, which makes sense. He is the emotionless robot, after all, or at least that is the part he has always played. Why would anyone expect him, having seen his partner die in front of him, brutally getting his limbs chopped off, to be negatively affected? So he goes about his day wearing the old scarf worn by his partner, living through the oblivion of nothing, a cold case. If you think the mother was lacking closure, he was the detective who was in the position to hear about new information, the one who had sworn to bring the one responsible to justice. And yet here he stood, unable to do anything because he lacked any leads. I went technical with the other two arcs, but for Harold it was all raw emotions, or lack of, because he could not truly grieve and could not truly avenge. For so long he sat like a corpse waiting for anything. One copycat later, and he is doing what he can to insert himself in the case, despite them not officially being assigned at first, just listening to the imitation's voice. When his partner was worried about his mental health, he used the fact he was supposed to be the perfect logical robot to claim Ichika was being hysterical before she could force his removal. All the while, the tunnel vision is building, especially after the real one kills the copycat, giving the first concrete clue in several years. So focused on his goal that he is not there when Ichika walks straight into a trap laid out by the nightmare, all using his voice. Then, after waiting for so long, he finally gets a chance. Of all the time pretending to be an emotionless robot, of all the time he showed no emotions as he continued to grieve, it all came together with himself in the room, with the perpetrator, with a gun he should be unable to shoot, and one partner standing in his way. Because for pretending avenging his friend's death, what Harold needs more than anything was to grieve. And when finally given that chance, when finally allowed to talk about his emotions, he was able to let revenge go. Because that is what therapy is about. We have emotions, and there's plenty of things in life that are keeping us from feeling and expressing them. And keeping them bottled up can often lead to dark places, like what Harold almost went through. Having some emotional outlet, even if it is just to talk to someone, is an important way for us humans to keep ourselves sane. Especially in this case, because if Harold had killed a nightmare, he would not learn that there was a second copycat, and that copycat was the actual one who killed his old partner. Now, with that knowledge and someone beside him to actually talk to so he can release his emotions in a healthy way, Harold can now focus on bringing the killer to justice. The right way this time. Grief and the bottling of emotions can take people down dark roads. Isolation can blind one from seeing all the options at their disposal. This arc did an excellent job of painting Harold's grief, even at times he was not able to show it, and showed that as much as an adversary the nightmare was, Harold's own shadow was much more of a threat this time. So, that brings us to our final question. Did I like the show? Honest with you, it turned out overall more on the bland side. Yes, as I showed here today, I enjoyed the overall themes of the show. I didn't enjoy the times we did get to dive, but I think that's part of the problem. We did not do that much diving into people's heads, now did we? They were beautiful and they had a wonderful soundtrack, but for one of the advertised selling points of the show, it was used sparingly. Which might be my fault. I was already comparing it to It Invaded before I watched the first episode, and that's not a fair comparison. Even with the gimmick out of the way, it was the relationships between our main characters and of actual artificial intelligence and humanity in general, which was the actual mysteries were playing second priority, which overall worked well, but I was actually in the mood to react to the mysteries. And as much as I liked the back and forth between the emotional hearts of the story, I still would have preferred a bit more focus on the mysteries. Overall, it was good, but not great. I'll still continue to debate where I can for full freedom of on pending robot neighbors, but a little more on the cases would have been more satisfying. And that brings us to the end. After appreciating a good mystery series, and as much as I wish we could have dealt with a few more interesting situations, but it was a show which gave us a lot to talk about. Hopefully we can get a few more interesting mysteries in the future, but for now, call that season at an end. Thank you everyone who watched this video, and whichever show you watch next with me, I hope to see you there. Take care.